Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this fourth Site B seminar, webinar, whatever we want to call it. It's fantastic to see so many people still joining us after so many sessions and from so far away. I mean, it's late in Beijing now, so welcome, Surong, and thanks for staying up so late. And welcome to some new faces as well as some old faces. It's lovely to see you. I'm Chris Cooper, and I'm going to be chairing this evening, and the session's going to be led by Adam. On behalf of the the organising group, David Davis, Kostas, Amoiropoulos, and Saushi, who I can't see at the moment. Sorry, as I was saying, Saushi is in the airport. He's been here in the UK working with us. Working with me for the week, and he's on his way home. So hopefully he'll be able to participate. But if he disappears, that's because he's having to check in his baggage. Is that correct?
I've already checked in.
He's checked in. Good. So it's good news. He may be able to fully participate. So just to recap, the previous three sessions three sessions have introduced the concept of sight, focusing on sight A by introducing a very simple situation and recontextualizing that situation through 4 different narratives that were offered by ourselves. And the second moved us to a focus onto sight B, which is the specific sight of the story. And what we decided to do as a group was to choose one of the situations that we'd all developed individually. We chose Kostas's story of the girl with the mobile phone in school and the teacher who was charged with taking the phone off her. And then the last session 3, we began to work towards site C, what I would call the central site, where we open up gaps in the imagination so that the participants, who are site D, the participants as the imagination, can make meaning, answer the why questions that we were all referring to in the first 2 sessions. And what we chose to focus on there was the particular process of metaxis and how we can protect the participant towards experiencing a moment of metaxis in process drama. This too was a development of the same story and situation of the girl student with the mobile phone and the teacher in school. So what we'd like to do today, led by Adam, is we're going to be focusing on cathexis and the use of objects and how this can be used as part of site C to access the site of the imagination through drama event. And that's what we're going to be attempting to explore practically today. So once again, we're going to be working with the same situation of the teacher who's been charged with removing the mobile phone from the girl who is present in school. So that's the overall aim of the session today. And how we're going to structure it is this way. So firstly, Adam is going to lead a practical exploration. Having done that, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I shall take the cue from you. And we've got up to 2 hours. It may be less, who knows? It all depends on how we progress. And then he's going to make a theoretical contribution based on his reflections on the practical exploration that we're going to start with. And then what we're going to ask is for a discussion between Adam, myself, David Davis, Kostas Amoiropoulos, and Saushi, if he's still online, just for 20 minutes to respond to the reflections that Adam has offered. And then after that 20 minutes, I'm going to open it up to the floor and we can have a discussion based on what you've observed and what you have gained from the practical session. So please, if you have any particular questions or observations, hold them back for that section of the seminar when I open it up to the floor. And I'd also just like to urge us all, if we are going to make any contributions or have any particular questions, try and address it and relate it to the practical work and Adam's theoretical reflections. So it keeps us as close to practice as possible, and away from the more abstract as possible. So if you could just bear that in mind, that would be useful. The other thing I just want to remind you, if you're not aware, we've got the Padlet. You've got the link for that in the email. There are some notes that have been placed up there, some 3 pages of notes based on excerpts from different documents that Adam shared. So hopefully you've read those. If you haven't, do take a look at them. And we will also use that as a space later for being able to add to that yourself if you have any reflections that you want to write down as well to contribute to the conversation. The other thing is you should have to hand your cardboard or real broken phone and any post-its so you can reach for them if required at any point. And other than that, I think that's all the information you need. And I just hand over to you, Adam.
Thank you, Chris. It's really good to get this excitement as well, whether we can still hear you or if someone's calling you as well to keep us on our toes. As Chris was saying, what I was planning to do today is actually quite practical, but there's of course there's a contradiction as we are all online, and it would be quite easy to explore this. I mean, do the practical part or exploration if we were in the same space. Of course, then we could reflect on it and try things out. But in this way, what I'll be asking you to do is try some of the elements out, keep in the thinking, but it's not like a proper workshop in the sense that I'll be asking Chris and Sashi and Kostas to try things out. We'll see who's available at the time, and then we can see that and then reflect on that. So they're doing it for us in a way. But some other parts that we'll be doing individually, I will be asking you to try as well if you want to. So you can join in wherever you feel, whether your camera is on or not on. No one's going to test you on that. And the other part of this is I thought, I mean, we started off this project, Side B project, around David Davis, people who have been working together for some time, thinking together for some time, to experiment and to research. So what I'm offering is absolutely in this sense. It's not a teaching course. I want to try something out. And I really want to pick your brains on it and get ideas back from you to use and to develop my thinking and my work. So so sorry for doing that. Sorry for using you, but I think this exchange might be really useful, perhaps for you as well, not only for me. So that's the sort of framing of the situation. I hope everyone's fine with that. Are you okay? Is that okay? Great, thank you. I'd like to go back to that situation that Kostas offered, and then both David and Kostas developed. We also were thinking about the context of that. So we have been working around it for some time, and I look back at some of the notes. But the question for me is really linked to how we can sort of use objects. It's all based around an object, which I think is really useful for us, but how we can use these objects to create the being in the role on one hand, and then how that can be developed into creating some sort of a gap in meaning, or some possible way of testing meaning and trying something out. So that's what I've sort of structured now, and I'd really like to start out. I'll get going as well some of you waved your broken phones, but I guess all of us own a mobile phone. Is that correct? Okay, every one of us owns a mobile phone. I'd like to turn that question around. How many of us feel that sometimes our mobile phone owns us? In what way? Can you say just a thought about that? In what way would you say your mobile phone owns you?
As soon as it makes a noise, I respond to it.
Okay.
And you
So
know,
like when you whistle to the dog and it responds.
yeah, kind of, yeah. Or you know, it makes a noise and I have to attend to it. Yeah, and then when it doesn't make a noise, I attend to it to check why it hasn't made the noise.
Okay. Thank you, Kate.
It's like Edward Bond's doorbell. You know, when the doorbell rings or the phone rings in his plays, and he used to say in rehearsals, well, what do? You answer it, don't you? You don't really have a choice.
Yeah. So someone's at the door. It's the same with the phone. Someone's knocking and wants to speak to you.
If you pause, if you wait, it creates tension. If you don't.
Okay. Thanks, Kate. Christina?
Have the phone off.
That's a possibility.
I'm of a generation that can't bear having that thing going. So I always have my phone off, much to everybody's annoyance.
Okay. But so David, does that mean you don't feel it has that presence in your life, or that?
No, it doesn't. I refuse to let it.
Okay. That's good to hear. I hope my wife doesn't hear it, because then she'll try to force me to do that.
I was going to say,
Go on, Sashi. Sorry.
I was going to say that you never turn off your phone anymore. I noticed that I've never turned it off. And that thing that Bobby just said about I put it on silent. I basically turn off all of my alerts, but I still check them. It didn't really urinate, but I check them.
It's quite counterproductive. Go on, Christina. Sorry, last thought.
Okay. When I owned my, can you hear me?
Yes.
When I owned my first iPhone, it was kind of late 2017, and I realized it started owning me when I was taking my daughter to the park, and instead of looking at her, how she's playing and enjoying her childhood, I was checking at emails. So at that point, I decided in my phone, I'm not going to have emails and Facebook, and I do that till now. So it's like a pet that I am trying to tame. It still rings, I have to respond, but no email, no Facebook on my phone ever since, just from my laptop.
Okay.
I don't want to be found at every point, any moment of the day.
Okay, so
Yes.
it's about that as well. Well, I mean, you know, these ideas you're sharing, they might be in that we're going back to that Greek school that Kostas offered us, and I'm going to keep our drama there. I'm not moving it to Hungary. You know, maybe even this way it's better for the teacher and the student. So it's in the Greek school, and they have a real, you know, they've put in place a no mobile phone policy. Students are not allowed to have switched on, use their mobile phones during the school hours, perhaps for those reasons, good reasons of trying to keep them safe and you know, stop them from being available all the time, stop their phones owning them, perhaps, or maybe for other reasons. You know, that's what's being said about it. And I'd like to look at the teacher and the student. Hi, Sorrel, so nice you're here. I'd like to look at the teacher and the student, and I'd like to try to set up an improvisation. Now, I mean, you can all decide on which roles you take. I'll ask you to decide on whether you'll be you know, we'd be in pairs if we were in the same space, and I would be asking you in pairs to decide which one of you is the teacher and which one of you is the student. But now we don't have the space really to get into pairs and do work in that way. So we'll be sort of doing a demonstration of that. So I'll be asking you, Chris, Kostas, Saushi. I would like Saushi and Kostas to be the same role. Which one would you choose, the student or the teacher? Saushi, Kostas.
The teacher.
Are you, Saushi, are you fine with that?
Yeah.
You're the teacher as well. And Chris, with you'll be a wide beard student with a wide beard, a very knowledgeable wise student. So I'll be asking you to take on these roles. Everyone else, they can decide whether they want to take on the student or the role of the teacher. And what I'd like to, you know, what we know about this teacher is that he's just got back into teaching. He's just got back into the school. He has a small daughter, a family, and he's not very comfortable with the students at the moment. At least that's the feedback he's getting. He's being told he's not sharp enough. He's not strict enough with these students, and that's the situation around him in the school. But before going into that situation with what's happening in the school, I'd really like to ask you to think about, maybe even draw on one of the post-its or a piece of paper if you have that on you, or the cardboard if you have that. Draw a sort of image, like a photo, that the teacher would like sometimes to look at on his phone. So when he's not feeling so comfortable, not feeling so strong, then maybe he takes out his phone and looks at that image, looks at that that photograph. I don't know who's on the photograph, whether he's on it, whether it's his family, whether it's friends, whether it's a specific moment that's happened. But I'd like to ask you to decide on that, and just have a think. If you've chosen the student, sorry to keep talking, but if you've chosen to be the student, then what we know about the student is that she's a member, or he's a member. I think let's not play with the genders here. If he's a student who is in a teenage member of a quite difficult family, where the parents are really out trying to find work, but have very little time. And on one hand, she has an ill grandmother. He has an ill grandmother. That's what we know. And he also has some smaller siblings at home. He's very much squeezed by his family to help. And those of you who are working, thinking of the student, I'd like to ask you to think of an image that the student shared from his phone on the social media at some point in the past few months. An image that, for some reason, he wanted to show others, maybe of himself, maybe of people around him. Try to think of this image, what that image would be that the student has shared. Okay, I'll just give you a minute to think of that, and just make a sketch for yourself. You don't have to show it to anyone. It's just basically for you to have an idea of this person. Is that okay? Is that clear? Good. 1 minute. Sorry, that's a really useful question from Bobby. How old is the student? 17. 17, 17 years old. And the teacher is in his 30s, late 30s, getting to 40. If you're ready, just sign to me. I mean, it doesn't, you know, you don't need to prepare it for an exhibition at the Tate Modern. It's fine. It's important to have an idea of the image and the content of that image. And I'd like to ask you to do one more thing with the image, okay? So if you were the student now, when the student shared this image on Instagram, wherever, what were the comments of people? I'm thinking of Facebook. I don't know if that works. I think it works with Instagram as well. What were the comments his friends made or people around him made? I'd like to ask you to write 3 comments that were under this photo from others. The teacher, he sent this image to someone at some point, not online on Facebook, but maybe to a relative, maybe to his wife, I don't know, to someone. And I'm really curious to whom the teacher sent that image and what did he write with the image. Okay, great. I'm really curious, Samshi. Can you share, if there's not too much noise around you and chaos, can you share what the image you thought for the teacher was and who he shared it with?
Right, what I've got is a snapshot, a screenshot of the Amazon. I got a lot of shoes on it. The message is for his wife, and he's saying, "What do you think of the red one for my dad?"
Okay, okay, thank you. Kostas?
It's more like a picture of his daughter sending to his father, saying, "Your granddaughter says good morning."
Great, great. David, which one did you choose? Can I ask you? We can't hear you now.
Sorry, I did both of them. I didn't know I had to do just one.
Okay, okay. Can you share the student one?
Yes, she sent a picture of herself just after she's washed her hair with shampoo, where her hair is sticking all up, and she says she's coming to school the next day looking like this.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Chris, what was your image? Thanks, David.
Sorry, it's indecipherable. It's a football match, and it's Ike scoring a last-minute goal, and all that mess is flares and fans just doing limbs everywhere. And he just wrote Elad. Oh, I don't know how to pronounce it. Eladas, who's the goal scorer, and the reply from someone who's a Panathinaikos fan is lucky.
Okay.
It's the day he
Thank you.
knew they were going to win the championship for the first time in about 35 years, I think, something like that.
Okay, okay. Thank you. I'm fascinated by you also knowing so much about Greek football.
You know, I'm an internationalist.
Okay, thank you. So I hope that this sort of created some basic image of you of this person. And what I'd like to try out is we'll be setting up for an improvisation which happens in the teacher's staff room. It's a staff room where not only this teacher is sat, but other teachers might be in the space as well. And actually it has the head teacher's office opening from, there's one door also going to the head teacher's office. Actually, on the teacher's table, there are quite a few things. I don't know what sort of things you can imagine being on the teacher's table. Can you say, Kostas, Sashi, can you say a few things that might be on this teacher's table in the staff room?
Laptop, examination papers.
Okay, Kostas?
There's a diary with the work he has to do, you know, meetings and obligations that he has to do. Pen, some papers.
Yeah. And along with this, there is also his mobile phone is on there. And on this mobile phone, there is an email he's received from the head teacher. And this email is directing him to deal with the case of this student who he has had a lot of problems with. The schools has had a lot of problems with. This student keeps not complying with the rule about the mobile phones and uses his mobile phones regularly in the school. And the head teacher has asked the teacher to deal with this. So what I'd like to ask you to do, Kostas and Saushi, and whoever taken on the teacher's role, write 2 of the sharpest sentences from this email from the head teacher that have really stuck in the teacher's memory. Yeah, it's in the email. For Chris, you're the student, and whoever was also the student, I'd like to ask you, because on this table there is not only the teacher's mobile phone, but also the mobile phone taken away from the student when he was using it last. The mobile phone taken away, and what I'd like to ask you to write is, since it has been taken away, he's received a text message from his grandmother asking for help. You know, you can sometimes see the text, a part of the text, even when the phone is, you know, when you don't read the whole thing, it's still flashing there on the top. So I'd like to ask you, students, to think of what specifically the grandmother, what specific words the grandmother is asking help with. What is the help she's asking for from the student? Okay. So if you're done, are you done with that, Chris?
Yeah.
Adam, I just need to ask something. Does the grandmother live alone? Is she a widow?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I think that could be the case. She's a widow. She really relies. I haven't expanded very much on that, but the grandmother really relies on the help of the student. She's unable to do a lot of things alone, and she really needs help. Genuinely needs help from the student, who is big enough to help, but the parents are very busy, just trying to make a living. So the student has taken up that role.
Right.
I think that's useful to clarify.
Sorry, can I?
Yeah.
Did you say she lives on her own?
No. The grandmother lives on her own.
Right. Yes. She does.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So what I'd like to try out is as an improvisation, a pair improvisation between the teacher and the student, happening in the staff room. The student is coming to get his phone back, which is on the teacher's desk, and the teacher has received this this directive from the head teacher to deal with this issue, and it's it's the final opportunity to sort this issue, because this is not going in a good way, good direction. So we could try that out and see how it works from the moment from the moment before the student steps into the staff room. There's no one else. It's after the school day, so there are no other teachers currently in the staff room, but it sounds like the head teacher is in his office, and his door is open. They can't see the head teacher, but they can hear someone fidgeting there, and they might feel that the head teacher can hear what's being said there. Okay, so we could try this out. I don't know how it will work with Chris being the student. And Saushi, do you feel you can be the teacher? Is the situation calm enough around you so we can try it out? What I'll do is I'll spotlight the two of you for all of us, so we only see the two of you. And let's see what happens. You can use the phone you have, if there is, but you'll have to use the camera as well to be able to put it there. And if you just start Saushi as the teacher, then I'll just say when the student enters. Okay, I'll just give you some time to do that. Is that okay? What's in your hand, Saushi? Is that the student's phone, or is that the teacher's phone?
That's student's phone. But I'm holding my phone.
Yes. So the
teacher. You want me to put it on the table? Do you want me to put it on the table?
The teacher can have his phone in his hand and can see the part of the text. If you can share that much, Chris, what's the part of the text that is visible on the phone from the student's phone?
It says, oh Jesus, Ella, as in, come on, I tripped on the ...
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
But that's on the phone on the desk.
Yes, that's on the phone. That's on the phone, the student's phone on the desk.
Okay.
So, Taushi, you can start. And the student enters the staff room.
Go.
And I have my phone.
Yeah. You're not going to use it again. Yeah.
Yeah, just can you give me the phone?
No, I need to know that I won't see you use it again. Okay.
Yeah, okay, give me the phone.
Well, so what you been doing with it?
Look, I said I won't use it again. Give me the phone.
It doesn't sound like it doesn't. What are you doing with it? Why are you always?
Look, you can't do
You can't-
this. Oh, you can't do this. I want my phone. It's not school time. It's end of school. Now give me it back. I said I won't use it again. Give me it back.
Okay. You can have it. Okay. Bye. What?
When did this come?
What? You've got your phone. Goodbye. Thank you. Hey, listen, you've got your phone, okay? And it's time to go. It's time to go home. What? Come on, now. You're being unreasonable now. You got your phone. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Okay? Goodbye. Thank you.
Your fault.
Now, listen.
It's your fault.
Now you're gonna want to stay here. It looks like that you're gonna want to stay
fault.
here. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. Stop.
Yours. You.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. No, that was great. Actually, I'm really I'd really like to ask you. I think the others can join in as well, to think about what the student wrote, what text message was the first one he sent after he left the teacher's staff room about this incident. What was the first text he wrote? And again, the teacher, the email responding to the head teacher's email, just a line from that. How did the teacher what did the teacher write about what happened at this meeting with the student? Okay. Next day. There is an incident in the yard, in the schoolyard. In the school break, the same student is seen with the mobile phone. And the head teacher notices it on the CCTV, the security camera, and sends the teacher to deal with it. He's obviously not been able to handle this problem so far. So it's the teacher's last chance now. It was supposed to be the student's last chance, now it's the teacher's last chance to deal with it. And something happens in this meeting, in this incident, with the student's phone. I'm not sure what happens. It's obviously at the center of the situation. Something happens with the phone. And what we could do is, if we were in the same space, to try it out and see what happens, how this situation develops. I won't be asking you to improvise this now, Saushi and Chris. I will stop here. But actually, this is the point where I was thinking that what would I need? So this is my question basically. What would it need? What sort of constraints would this next improvisation need for the students participating in it, or whoever's participating in the improvisation, to create a moment of cathexis around the phone? That's how far I wanted to get with the practical part, and I'll just stop here and hand back over to Chris to chair the discussion. Is that good, Chris?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Although I thought you were going to give some reflections first, or do you want the discussion first?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what's the best way to go. I'll give a short reflection myself on that, on what I was trying to do. Maybe that's a good reference point. But then you can respond to that, and or any other questions, other thoughts coming up. So
okay.
I'm quite interested in what is the least that's needed to be in role, or to get into role, and to be able to be in the situation of someone else. And I was thinking in the planning, I was thinking, what are the personal and the social elements that can be there in the phone, in the object itself, that can help sort of build some elements of the role. Those elements that can be enough to be pressure, that can be enough to sort of give a sense of the person, if for the participant improvising that role. And that's a question, if that's, and you know, it's a question to those of you who are taking part in the improvisation as well, whether this was enough, this was or it was too little to understand the situation, or whether it remained too generic, and if that's a problem. And I thought that first, it's useful to create this basic situation, and the situation around the phone, before it's being developed in the next improvisation, in the next situation, where it is, specifically set in a way that there is something happening with that phone. So so that was basically my thinking behind it. Of course, it's related to the quotes from Edward Bond as well, which just sort of saying it works through creating a normality first and then developing that. So how's that normal created? What's the normal, and how can that be developed and elements of that be sort of twisted? That's the question for myself. I'm also quite interested myself in what sort of dramatic constraints can be added that make the participants themselves conscious creators. So put them in what Bolton defines as the making mode of drama, being the playwrights as well as the participants. And I think some of that it could help. So, for example, putting the object and something happening to that object might be useful in that, but it might not be enough, I think, to create cathexis. So that's the question for me. What sort of constraint would be useful there? And that's what I'd like to open up for discussion, Chris.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just to remind people, we said just for the next let's say for the next 18 minutes that we just have this discussion between David and Kostas and Adam and Soshi and myself, and then we'll open it up. So responses please from the co-organizers to what we just did and what has just been said. I mean, I had an immediate response, which was, I mean, it's very, in terms of the minimum of what's needed. I mean, obviously, one of the things that, it sounds a bit obvious to say this, but I'll throw it in anyway, was I really felt the distance between us through the screen almost impenetrable. And because actually my instinct was to have physical contact, and obviously I wasn't able to, but that didn't feel a very helpful constraint. But then I thought, well, what would have been the other constraints that would have helped me? And I felt that because we didn't have the presence of being in the space, we weren't really able to sign very well and feel the tension. So there was no tension between us. And so I think, though, even if we had been together in the space, I think I would have perhaps needed more constraints in terms of slowing time down, and perhaps even constraining what could or couldn't be said. So, for example, even maybe dictating how many exchanges there were, or who must speak first, or who mustn't speak first, or even perhaps that one doesn't speak at all. I don't know about that, but I felt the real need for those kind of constraints. But I think if we'd have been in the space and there'd have been a slowing down of time and a limitation on what we could and couldn't do, I don't think it would have required for me that much more for me to be able to play with it. But I found it obviously really difficult because we were on Zoom. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the minimum, it's really hard not to have a very strong objective. So I really didn't know. I mean, it felt like that it was very easy to let go of the phone, and I think was carry that on with those messages and all that. Was a bit sort of trying to save the scene, if you will, but I wasn't very clear about what the goal was being in that realm. So what was my objective? And I think without it, it's certainly quite difficult to find a way to move this forward. I found being the head teacher's door being open quite useful. I was trying to play something with it. I found that being an interesting constraint because we were struggling with it, adapting it, you know, with how to make this head teacher's mindset into the teacher. And we did all that email writing and all that. I think we were trying to get into that, but physically, I think that door was really interesting, being open. But then I didn't know what to play with that. I don't know if that's minimum. That's something that I needed to know. But I felt like there's something there in terms of the site that was really interesting. And then maybe if we worked on a little bit about that door, you know, the door being open is to make it more clear about the head teacher being in there, what sort of things that he's working on. I think that might, I don't know, answer to some extent Chris's question about the minimum, the sort of adding more constraint into it. But I thought that was really interesting. And another thing was interesting is maybe it was useful to ask the pair to come up with that message. I mean, if the message sort of come up on the screen, and then it has something to do with the teacher or something, that maybe helped slow things down. I don't know.
I mean, just to add in agreement with that, because in one sense it was very clear what my objective was. I wanted my phone back because I need to look after my grandmother. But then in my imagination, I couldn't see the message at first. It was only after a few moments that I saw it flash up, and then of course that was just everything. So it was different to Sashi's experience of it, I think, because obviously I just need my phone back because I need to be in contact with her. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah,
I generally agree with what Chelsea has said, and Chris as well. I have to say that for me as a watcher, it did have some tension. I did feel that there was a tension building there. I think that it was Chris's input that made it, you know, created this kind of tension for us. I mean, he insisted, he invented this thing. He insisted a reaction and a stance was quite threatening, I would say, for the teacher, and that created a moment where you didn't know what exactly is going to happen. So I think I felt this tension there, and I felt uncomfortable, to be honest, when I was watching it. But I was a watcher. I don't know. I might have had the same reaction if I was watching it in a room, in a physical space. But I do agree that the objective of the teacher wasn't rather clear. Maybe that's why I felt as well that it was very easy to give the phone back to the student. Maybe because the head teacher was not present, it was not felt present at that moment. And at the same time, maybe if there was a kind of a demand from the part of the teacher, which is actually the school and the head teacher himself, you know, something like a contract, I don't know, something like, you know, a demand on the student that would make it more difficult, delaying the action more on that. I don't know what would be that, but I think maybe it needed something like that. So teachers' decision wouldn't be made so easy. Something should be at stake here, something more than just giving the mobile back, I think.
Yeah. Shall I come in there, Adam?
Yes, please do.
No, I agree so far with what's been said. I mean, I think it was quite, it showed great skill really to develop the situation from within. I wonder if kids would have had the same you know, skills to draw on. And I think, yeah, if I mean, the thing that was struck me strangely, nothing really to do with what we're talking about, but was how the phone was cathexed. You know, it cathexed 3 times for me. It was to start with a plaything, a toy, and then it became a real family, you know, emergency for the family. It was a real personal life saver, and then it became a sort of weapon. So it just, maybe because we've been talking, you've been writing about cathexis and so on. I switched onto that as well, which may not be what you wanted or appropriate, but it just struck me that that became very clear when Chris was pointing it like a gun almost at the teacher, accusing him of. But I think that's quite difficult. What the actual student might have done when he's seen the message from his gran and just, I don't know, he may just have run out the staff room, run home as quick as he could and left the situation because his gran is on the floor or something and needs help. She needed help for a long time. She's still on the floor. So he'd have just, you know, I'll deal with this teacher later, get out of here quick.
Yeah.
I don't know. Those are immediate thoughts.
Yeah. No, I think that's really useful about the objective of the teacher and doing something about that. And of course, I don't think the students would do what Chris was doing. If you know, he's more engaged in what, I mean, Chris is engaged in what he's engaged in, so that's his imperative to create a situation like that with tension. But actually, I mean, in that sense, in my planning, I would be quite satisfied without the students going to that level, and I would want them to do that in the next situation. So I'd rather use this situation to put them to sort of try to test out this role and try to test out this relationship, and then create a more extreme moment in the next one. But I think that written apology, you know, Bobby's just writing, and you know, it's something like that, demanding something like that would have created that tension. And you know, but even if it's going into doing that, but so what my thinking, just I'd like to sort of expand on the theoretical part, and I'm not reading the chat. Bobby's note just popped up, so I haven't read that yet, but we can get there and open the discussion. I just share that much that, you know, the two things that really stick with me when I'm thinking about objects, and one of them is actually from Three Looms Waiting. I'm sure all of you know this Heathcote video, and it really struck with me how she's building the role when the students ask her to play the prisoner of war camp, and she asked them to get a rifle in there, an imagined rifle in their hand, and then you know, ask them to practice putting the gun down, because that's the essence of being a prisoner of war. They have to, and then she creates a situation, you know, she plays a situation where they hand the rifles out of the wherever they get caught, and what really grabs me in that is how usefully the role can be sort of grasped in one object and an action in that with that object, I you know, and I sort of put that as a challenge for myself, if I can try to find something like that. Not that I've ever been able to do something like, you know, of that clarity, but it's you know, it's in my mind to sort of use objects in that way. And the other thing that's in my mind very much is more connected to Bond's work, and let me share my screen with you. Sorry for doing that. It's actually I'm sharing the screen. I'm sharing this new book. I hope you can see it. Can you see it? Is it visible?
Yeah.
So it's from the book that's been printed by Trinity to celebrate David's work, and it's my, I have a chapter in it, and it's the easiest to share it from here. It's apart from the children, the Edward Bond play, The Children, and it's a moment, you know, it's from the first scene, the brick is being used in it, and by Joe, the child, who is at the center of this play, and then the child burns down a house, and then they find this man. I don't want to go through the whole story, but actually there's this moment when this man is killing a group of children who are escaping with this brick, and it's happening in this scene. And then this part here is from the play, and this is what I wanted to share, because I think it sort of shows the structure of cathexis in action, how the man is switching. Well, after killing a child, he's sitting down and he's lost, you know, and he's saying, he's talking about his son, and he's talking about these kids he's killing, basically saying, if it was different, we'd be friends, and that he'd take care of them. And you know, he's saying so much to learn. And while he's before we know ourselves, and while he's saying that, he's beginning to cradle the brick and stroke it, and then starts through this action of cradling and stroking the child, starts to speak about his own death. Lately, my sickness has been worse. I shan't survive. And then he hums. And all that, you know, the brick is at the center of that. There's a real clear structure of what I'd understand as changing the narrative, basically, around the object. So there's this object which has been part of one narrative, and then it's put into another narrative. It's of course imbued with different values, but the narrative that it's a part of, that it plays a role in, is changing around it, and at least it helps me to understand cathexis in this way. And then, of course, it turns back. The brick itself is turned back into a lethal weapon, and the man gets back into killing the kids who he just said he could be helping and taking care of if everything was different. But of course, it's him taking revenge, and of course, there's the sound at the end to reflect on all of that, and open a gap for how we understand that. So it's just this structure that I wanted to share as a sort of theoretical or dramatic input into this discussion, which is another thing which remains with me about how can I help students create that in their own improvisation, because of course in the improvisation they need to create it. So it really depends on me, on the constraints I give them, so that those constraints help them you know, recreate the narrative around the object, and change the narrative around the object, change the discourse around the object again and again, by how they use it and what they say, and what are the actions that they do around it. So that's another constant sort of challenge for me. And of course, you know, I thought it would be lovely to get more ideas about how to do that, or discuss further through this example, and maybe just also thinking and talking about the next step for the next improvisation in the schoolyard. What sort of constraints could help the participants? But I'll stop here, Chris, and I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to respond to what you were just saying briefly, just from my experience in it, because as David said, you know, I think as Kate pointed out in a comment, my instinct immediately was to run to get out of once I got the phone, was to get out of the classroom. But obviously I'm staying there because I'm trying to explore something that could happen. And obviously, I think there's a difference between me doing it and kids doing it. And the support that they'd need to be protected into that would be a much, a much higher level. But I think what I meant about the slowing down of time was the kind of constraint that Kate or Christina and Bobby were referring to. If somehow that door gets shut because the head teacher's on the other side, so the teacher is forced into a false confrontation, that would really slow it down. And staying in that situation, I think I could really sense, if you like, I could sense the creativity of the object, even in such a difficult exercise like that. And if you had the right kind of ways of slowing and stretching out time, putting, whether it's a demand that he's got to write a written apology, sit down here and write before you leave, or whether because he's so integrated the social order into his unconscious self, or whatever it is, I could really see how the phone kind of began, I could almost feel it begin to be quite creative in my hands, in the way that the brick is in the children that you were talking about. And I think that's really interesting in terms of changing the narrative, or I think sometimes we talk about changing the grammar of the object, and it's almost like I could sense that the phone really had that potential. But as you've said, it's really important that we recognize what would be required, particularly for young people, and then as a next step, what the next improvisation might be in the playground. And unless anyone of our fellow organizers wants to add anything, I'd like to open it up to the floor for us to have a more general discussion about what elements would be needed to take this further, what next steps there might be. But I'm just checking with you, Kostas and David and Selshi, if you want to add anything before we open it up into a more general discussion.
I think I should say something here. I mean, I did think that what Adam has created for us today, it was a very interesting step to create the context for the next meeting between the teacher and the student in the yard, the schoolyard later. And I think that it created a kind of a background where children, the whole situation might be made believable for the people, for the participants to live through in the next step. So in that sense, I think it was very, very helpful. But at the same time, as we said before, the new scene that Adam has created also had to have another one building on it towards it, so could be felt in a deepest level with clear objectives, clear context, etc., etc. From my part, what I'm trying to do all these years is to try to create these situations in a process drama, or say it as you like, drama in education or whatever, where participants would be able to create this kind of texts like Chris, for example, has done today. But we have to be clear that the students are not Chris in a sense of they are not experienced writers on things like that, or they don't all the time want to support the work. They might want to do other stuff at that moment. So how they're going to connect with the material is very, very important for me. And all these years, I'm trying to find ways to do it. How they could be connected as much so they can create this text that Bond is giving or Chris is writing in his own place. Because this is a big difference between process drama and theater. I mean, we don't have a text, written text with details, step by step, action by action, as Bond is normally doing in his plays. It's the participants will create this text. How we're going to put them in the position to create this kind of text is so crucial and very important. And I don't think I have found it till now, but this is what I'm looking for all these years, and I'm keep trying doing it. So I don't know. It's the question that actually we deal with today, and in all these sessions we're doing. I think it's this: how do we build a context where participants are authors, are creating the text themselves, and they are deep artistic experience through the process drama.
Okay, thank you, Kostas. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think, I mean, I'm presuming that the drama teacher would have that group of children, say, for a year. And in that process, they're developing an art form, and they're developing in the children, you know, the student as playwright, student as artist performer. You know, that they're creating their own sets and scenes. They're understanding the whole of how the theatre form works from the inside, so that it doesn't mean to say that at the end of a year you've got everything sorted, but it seems to me that that's a process that you're working on as a drama teacher for all that time. And I think one of the problems of, as I've had to do for many, many years, you go in and do a one-off lesson, demonstration lesson or something, you know, you're missing that whole long-term longitudinal development of going over and being able to refer back. Do you remember when we did that? Now, you know, we can refer to that. Now that, remember that example that, you know, so-and-so invented there, and how we got in behind that, we're reminding each other, we're developing ourselves as artists in that art form, the ability to use that art form. And so I think that's what, for me, Kostas is working on there, which I think is absolutely right.
Sorry, so, thank you, David. Do you want to add anything, Saoshi, before we open it up?
Nope.
No. Okay, so I think just to my sense here, building on what Adam said about how you change the narrative, and Kostas's question about how we can enable the steps that are required for the kids to be deeply connected to the situation in a admissible, in a connected in the sense where they are in the position to be able to be deeply creative, as almost playwright, artist, performer in their own right. What steps are required in order for them to want to put themselves into that kind of position? Because obviously they're in a very different, they're in a very different place than we are in exploring here now. So again, if anybody would like to share their thinking or any responses or any particular questions relating to what we've done, please feel free to do so.
Could I make some comments?
Yes, of course.
Okay. When Mr. Davis mentioned the situation, which is very actual for many of us, the one-off drama sessions, where you work with children that you're asking them basically to create signs that have a thick meaning for the first time in their lives, then there is this issue of how are they going to make an improvisation such as the one Chris created, or even I'm sorry, the name of your colleague who played the director, Shoshi. Yes. Because the strength in Chris's process was the economy, in the very, very particular movements, use of the hands, and the very few very well chosen phrases. And the strength in your colleague was these almost sadistic pauses where he was kept repeating, no, you can't have the phone. No, you can't have the phone. Where like I couldn't, he made me question, ask myself the question, why he cannot have the phone. He apologized, now he can give it back. So what's this teacher really trying to get from that student? But one thing that could be done is that we can decide in advance 2 or 3 signs. We can first of all, we can break the students in pairs, and then we can decide in advance 2 or 3 signs we want the teacher to create, and we want the student to create. So, for example, Mr. Davis mentioned that the phone was cathexed first as a message tool, then as a weapon, and then as a, if I remember correctly, as a connection with family. So we could at least give them some kind of direction. We can ask certain signs to appear with each improvisation pair. And I'm sure that every pair will do something different. In that case, I suppose we shouldn't allow them to use real phones, because someone might choose to throw the phone against the teacher, you know, extreme actions. So they should better be using cardboard papers. This is what I would do with the case of working with children who haven't done process drama before. And in the case of constraints, as Chris, because of the acting, the enactment of Chris, when Adam asked us to write a phrase from an email that the teacher would send to the director, me, from the side of the teacher, I wrote the following phrase. Instinctively reacting to Chris's performance. I feel personally threatened by this boy. I don't want to be alone in the same room with him again. So, and then Adam asked that we think about certain constraints. So I thought, oh, well, I already put a constraint here, which would make it very difficult, which wouldn't allow me to create a scene in the backyard with the teacher alone with the boy. But I could bring someone else along with me, and then that would make it very difficult for the boy having to face 2 or 3 adults. That would feel really restricting for the boy, an intimidation from adults. And then we'd go to another level, a level of abuse of authority. Then we would examine another issue of this dual relation, teacher, student, teenager, adult. And then I could use it like that. I also found very interesting the comment, the suggestion by Kate, that maybe the teacher might ask the boy that he's not allowed to leave the room until he apologizes, which I don't even know if it's legal. And it creates a sense of imprisonment for the boy, a real abuse of authority. And then it creates the question, what would the boy do in that case? But all this makes me think that perhaps the role of the student should be performed by the teacher in role, because it carries this responsibility, you know, of the teacher in role could allow himself to enact an extreme situation that perhaps the student a real pupil might not be willing to do so. And later in the course of the workshop, the students could see that if the teacher in role allows himself to do very to imagine and enact extreme situations that they can also be allowed to play such situations. It's really very, very interesting how the economy, you know, of not saying lots of words and making very particular movements that have very particular orientation between the two performers can create so much gap to be filled with meaning. That's
Okay.
it for me.
Thank you, Christina.
Mhm.
Kostas, you raised your hand.
Okay, sorry, just keep adding things maybe. I don't know if it's helpful or at all. Also talking about what Christina has just said. I mean, I think we need to be clear here that actually there is no a recipe for these kind of things. We cannot define particular steps every time we do drama with participants in a process drama. And I'm not talking about performance here. I'm talking about process drama. So I taught myself from 4 years old to adults for many years. And I've realized that it was very different working with 4 years old than with teenagers or adults. Sometimes I've designed something for young kids, but it works much better with adults when I do it with adults. So in that sense, it's so different, the context where you are, the ability they have, the knowledge of drama they have, and all sorts of other stuff. So you need to be very careful of all this kind of stuff. So I'm not looking for a kind of sequence of steps which formulate a kind of recipe for that, because I think even every drama has a different way to approach it. So in that sense, we need to be open a little bit on that. On the other hand, I think that the fake phone was a very interesting idea, not because they're just, you know, for practical reasons, that maybe a student would throw it and hit the other person in the scene, but mostly because it's an open object. It's an object to be imagined rather than to be defined from the beginning from someone else, you know, a given mobile or something. So you imagine how this object is, and you then opens your imagination in a sense of cathexing it in a different way later. But I think that that was a very interesting way to do a mobile phone instead of a real phone. Yeah, I think that's it at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Adam Seaboy has his hand.
Oh, sorry, I can't even see where. Sorry, Adam.
Yes, yes.
Oh, you're there now. So
Yes, I'm here. And 209 years old, the Constitution is, Chris. So the very quickly, so just what I've been thinking about is like just connecting to what Kostas have been saying. Is that when it comes to the cardboard phone, I think it's I can really understand why Adam was using the cardboard phone, but I'm still thinking about the old broken phone. So actually, and what I've been thinking about is like how much it is in a way shapes our thinking in advance. And what was the purpose of it? Or was it a purpose? At least for me, it really started to shape my thinking. So we were asked to bring an old broken phone. And also we were asked to show an old broken phone. And the entire sequence runs into a situation when something is happening with the phone on the schoolyard. I mean, it's at least for me, I just cannot think anything else but the phone will get broken. So, and what is opening up as a gap for me, like how it is getting broken, who broke it, when, why is it getting broken? But it's not anymore like what happens with the phone. I just cannot think of anything else than the phone getting broken, and I just really don't know why, or also the purpose with the old broken phone. Because if you just stick to the cardboard phone, and then we run to this sequence, run the sequence to the point that something will happen to that phone. Then something really can happen. Anything can happen to that phone, and it really opens up the imagination, at least for me. And I might not think about the phone being broken by someone, but I might think about something else happening with the phone. But as soon as I have a broken phone in front of me, I see a broken phone in the hand of Chris, being used as a gun, as a shield, immediately it just shapes my imagination. So, and it's not just a reflection, it's rather a question. And it's also a question for me, like how cathexis works, what is the purpose of so what is the best way of building up a process towards a cathexis? All of you guys who are hosting this session know a lot more than me. As much as I understand it, it is something like a very neutral object that is introduced as a neutral object, and it has its everyday meaning, and all of a sudden something very strange happens with it, or something that is I have to find my own meaning for what has happened to this object. And when it comes to the cardboard phone, it opens up for that. But when it comes to an old broken phone, it really restricts the thinking, at least for me, probably for others as well, but at least for me. Yeah. So my question is like, why an old broken phone, and why not just a cardboard phone, and how does it help the cathexis, or does it have the cathexis? Thanks.
Yes, Kate. Sorry, I didn't see you.
I think it's all right. I only just put my hand up. I think cathexis, it's Freud that goes on about cathexis, isn't it? He dreams cathex objects, and an object is cathexed in a dream for Freud. When it becomes polysemic, it has more than one meaning. So, you know, Freud's looking at that, and I think we're using it in drama when it doesn't have its usual meaning, just as you said, Adam. It's when it's not functioning in the normal way you expect it to function. It's connected to Freud's idea of slips, which is connected to Bond's idea of accidents, which is connected to the sort of weird things you imagine when you're in role that you didn't expect. The red carpet that appears out of nowhere and you go, ooh. I think we're dealing with the unconscious when we're dealing with cathexis and with drama, and we're somehow it's making the unconscious visible to us in a really interesting way, ways that subvert the social order because they are not doing things that you expect. What I can offer, if it would be useful, is a way of defining the difference between process drama and performed drama, using my map of the theatre of Dionysus. And what I'd like to do, if people would find it useful, is to analyse Adam Bethlenfalvy's brilliant lesson, just so that we can see structurally what's going on and how it relates to drama performed, how drama in education relates to drama performed in a theatre, but twists it in a different way. So if that would be useful, I can just talk for 4 or 5 minutes on that.
Yeah. Okay,
so when Adam, I've sort of elaborated on this a bit since last time I fetched it up, but when Adam asked us to draw the portrait of the student on the bit of paper, he was putting us in the iconic mode. And I always find it incredibly powerful. And I, you know, even then I'm sort of hooked by it in terms of getting into role, because I draw things I don't expect to draw. I'm kind of, it's still my conscious mind, but the image never looks like what I expected it to. And in terms of Dorothy Heathcote's 33 conventions, of dramatic action, which I can provide a link to in a minute. Conventions 1 to 15 are all about looking. And this convention that Adam chose, just to analyze it, was convention number 5, which is the role as portrait of a person, not three-dimensional, but in all other ways the same as an effigy. And the lovely thing about having it on a post-it note is it's iconic, but it's also inactive, because you can move it around, you can pick it up and stick it places and move it, and it can come to sort of represent the person, almost like a mask or a persona. Then he asked us to write words, and that puts us in the symbolic register. This is Jerome Bruner as well as Lacan, actually, because Bruner talks about iconic, symbolic and inactive, and I map that onto iconic, symbolic and real. So I read Lacan and Bruner together, definitely, very much. And we're being playwrights at that point, and we're thinking about what the characters would say, and that helps us get into role too. And again, in terms of Heathcote, this is conventions 16 to 33, which are all about the word, who speaks. And when Adam asked us to write what the grandma had put on her text to the student, it's number 17 in Heathcote's conventions, an account of a person written as if from that person, but read by someone else, e.g. a diary, a letter, and you could update that to say or text message. I really think Heathcote really thought of all the different permutations that you can be iconic and inactive and symbolic and inactive together. And then when the pairs work happened, we went into the inactive mode. So, and that's when site D opens up, I think. And I think, as I say, I read Bruner's iconic, symbolic and inactive with Lacan's iconic, symbolic and real. So I think we go into the real when we go into role. And that's when mistakes and accidents and slip-ups, Freudian slips and things all happen. And as I've said before, you know you're in role when you start seeing things, but you know you're not hallucinating. But your imagination is really firing. And it's not, these aren't images that society has provided us with, no mise en scène. They just appear from our unconscious minds. And so I think we can see cathexis happening in D, which in terms of the theatre of Dionysus, it's the thing behind the skeina. So it's the register that cuts out the visual. It's the imagination is working, not the actual eye. So the auditorium in the theatre of Dionysus is about looking, and the stage is about speaking. And when we were talking about metaxis, it's crossing this line from looking to looking and speaking. And Heathcote says, I found a lovely quote from her in her conventions for dramatic action. She says, well, when I go into role, I shift from preparing them to actually being in role. I just talk like I'm there. That's all I do. So the stage is very much about speaking, the symbolic register. But the register we're interested in, the spooky cathexis unconscious, where you start to see things, where things slip up, where the social order gets subverted, where all the interesting stuff starts to happen. That happens when you're in role. And incidentally, with my students, a couple of years ago when we were all locked down and we were doing drama on Zoom, I put them into pairs work in breakout rooms on Zoom. And it works. I was astounded. I never thought it would work, but I used breakout rooms. I put them into pairs, and then I called them back to the main room. And I did that thing of, you know, when you were doing this, what could you see? And the red carpets and the peculiar imaginary things were all still there. And it's like, oh my God. you can trigger site D, the site of the audience imagination, on Zoom. Who knew? I think that would be really good for us to try sometime as a group, is going into breakout rooms and seeing if we can do that. And I think we'd find we could. I think that was everything I had to say. Just trying to talk about how process drama still uses the sites of the theatre. And this is what Edward Bond kind of teaches us, although he and Heathcote didn't see eye to eye, and they are doing the same thing, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Kate. David, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, just to echo Kate really about the way that Edward Bond takes objects, ordinary objects, and twists them or puts them in contexts where you have to look at them again because they're changing their meanings, a bag of crisps or a brick. And I'm just wondering if the mobile phone is just too tied to so many associations, or ordinary everyday associations, and then maybe what Adam says about a broken phone could be richer in some way. Once you break the phone, then you can't use it anymore for its ordinary purposes, but it can have other meanings that start to accrue around it in drama. So maybe that could be something that could be pursued further in future developments of this drama. That's all I was thinking.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to add something about the cardboard phone, because and Adam Seaboy's question, because because this is of interest to me, is because I wasn't seeing it as a broken phone, so I was seeing it as a functioning phone. The task was you could bring an old phone so you could bang it about and do what you want with it. So imaginatively, I was seeing a functioning phone, and actually what gave it a real power to me, because I did make my own cardboard one this afternoon with Soshi, and I didn't like my cardboard one because I didn't feel the authenticity of the weight of it, but of course the experience from within side and manipulating the object is different to what the viewer might necessarily see. So I take entirely your point, Adam Seaboy, that you could only imagine that at one point it's going to be broken. Although that wasn't what was functioning for me. I determined, no, it's a functioning phone, I'm getting a message from it, but I really appreciated the weight of it, and I found that really interesting, how for your experience of being in it, a sense of authenticity of the object is really important, and I often get that sense of dimension and weight being really important in trying to work in that way with objects. But I think David's point is very interesting, because I agree that it's like a gun. A gun is very limited in the way it can operate in moving between the iconic and the symbolic and the inactive, and maybe a phone is like that too. And what always feels the most powerful are the most ordinary objects, because they become so extraordinary potentially. Cups, plates, those things that you can project a lot onto seemed always really important, but a sense of its dimension and its weight, its authenticity also feels quite important too. And of course, a broken phone, if it is presented as a broken phone, is no longer a phone. In a way, it's something else, which of course could be an interesting dimension. Adam, you want to come back? Not come back, you want to contribute?
Yes. Yes, I think, apart from having a lot of broken phones in one of my bottom drawers, which I always think will be extremely useful one day in a drama session, and I actually never use, so maybe that was my unconscious drive here. But actually, I think I really feel, I think I find the iconic really useful to create the story, or to create the it triggered the imagination. But in the improvisation, I like the weight, as Chris was referring to, of the object, and sort of the reality of the object. But I think the real question for me is, and it's related to our next session actually, is about creating the extreme, and how do you make this the extreme? I mean, it's interesting to think about that, because I think that the brokenness might have the sort of potential of breaking it. But it's something it will be useful to think about. My phone is broken, but it doesn't look broken, for example, but it doesn't work. So it's quite interesting, but it's actually that's the question for me about how you make that, what Kate is calling the accident, or Chris is calling the extreme in other places happen in the improvisation. I think that's the real question, and for that I think it's the awareness as well of the structures that create the extreme that are needed. I'll just stop here because I'm really curious about the contributions from others.
Okay, thank you. Bobby or Sorrel raised their hand first, and then we've got Maria as well. But go on.
Yeah, I'll try to be very quick. We used to do, as students used to work with children from school. They'd come to a place called Safe Side, which was literally a kind of like a film set. It had a real bus, a canal, a real train, and we'd try and use Imroll to work around the whole notion of safety. This was the Safe Side is run by the West Midlands Fire Service. But one of the difficulties is it's far too real. But it doesn't do what it would do in real life. So the bus doesn't move, the train doesn't move, but they're there as real objects. I don't know if other people recognise this. Children often, if you give them a toy that is too realistic, can't play with it. They actually need something that they can transition in many ways, in terms of Vygotsky, what Vygotsky says. So I'm torn between the cardboard phone and the use of a real object. I suppose it depends on how you can manipulate it or how you can use it in the drama, because sometimes if it's too real, somehow you can't play with it.
Yeah. No, I think that's really useful, because I was also trying to find the right size of piece of wood. So I had the cardboardness, but I also had the weight. But yeah, I think that's really useful to point that out, Bobby. Yeah, Maria. Hello.
Hello from me too. I'm very happy to see you. Well, about the object, I made a cardboard mobile phone, and actually I drew a girl. I was a student. My role was a student. So actually the picture was a girl holding from other friends in a concert. And to make that help my imagination quite well to get in contact with this item, this cardboard. So actually it helped me quite a lot, this object. And I feel that if I would use a real object, probably it would be more difficult for me, because I would afraid to not make any damage or whatever. That's about the object. Also, one constraint that I thought about the teacher, because I work in a high school and I have quite tough students. So one constraint could be that for the teacher could be that if yes, quite a few times that student had be occupied with the mobile phone, and teacher asked him to put away this mobile phone, but he keep on playing and working with it. So now the rule from the school would be to be expelled the student, but he has a lot of hours away from the school, so the teacher, when the student arrives to pick up the phone, thing is under the thinking of would he expel the student or not, and the student will know that he has to be expelled. So probably this kind of situation would make more strict rules and more, how can I say, make more crisis for the decision that teachers could make, and also student how he could react. And then we could play with the time. What will happen if the student will be expelled? Would he lose his year or not? And these kind of things. That's what I was thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Now we're just coming up to the last 7 minutes of the session. I just want to create a space for anyone to say anything that hasn't yet. And then I'd ask my co-organizers if they want to make any closing remarks or responses before we round it up. Okay, so I've got Christina wants to speak. Does anybody else want to? Anyone who hasn't or would like to? Okay, yeah, Christina.
Okay, can I go? Yeah, about the issue of using real objects and the fear that the workshop participants might ruin them. Well, I'd just like to make an honorary mention to my dear professor John Somers from the University of Exeter, who's spent many years perfecting the technique and art of the compound stimulus, which is a collection of objects and documents that all together, when they're compound, they stimulate you to think of who they could belong to and why they're all together, what's the story they're telling, and what questions do they open that the participants can fill in with their imagination and their improvisations. And of course, in a compound stimulus, the objects have to be real. I mean, you can't put unless if you do make an agreement in advance with your participants that they imagine that certain fake or objects made of paper are actually real, but the beauty, the attractiveness of a compound stimulus, actually, as I've used it countless times, and my students every year fall in love with it, and some of them use it in their workshops. The beauty of it is the actual real objects which are being placed into that pack, and the drama pedagogue can very simply put certain constraints from the beginning as to how these objects will be handled, by also handling them with his own hands with care, since they are supposed to belong to someone else. There is this I mean, if we think about drama as also something that where theater gets in, and we want to teach theater skills, then you know, in theater, we learn not to ruin the props, to respect the props, and to ruin only the props which are being designated from the beginning to be ruined. So we can think in advance that certain objects inside that we give to the students, that we want them to be cathexed and then maybe decathexed, and as they're decathexed, in the process of that they get destroyed, that we choose them to be objects that can be really ruined. I had the case of a student recently who did his master work on the life of Federico Garcia Lorca, and he created an amazing suitcase of Lorca that where he made poets and photographs that supposedly belonged to Lorca, and they were so beautiful, so authentic looking, authentically looking. And he wanted in the end that the supporters of Franco, who arrested Lorca and had him executed, that they find the suitcase and destroy all these documents. But they looked so beautiful. So I told him, listen, you can't ask your participants to do that. That will be an emotional ordeal for them. So either do it symbolically, ask them to do it symbolically, or do it yourself, take over the role of a Franco-fascist and do it yourself, or create documents which are photocopies, make a bunch of photocopies for every workshop you want to do, so that they can ruin them without, and then you can have, without guilt, and then you can have more to continue doing your workshops. So I would like that we do not forget the beauty and the, you know, attractiveness, the catch, the lure of the real object in one real object inside an empty space, which is designated to be our workshop space, full of participants. And then, you know, this one object is full of will become real, and at the same time not real, because it will be filled in with so much different meaning that we will see it as a theater object. We will forget its reality, and it will gain a different reality, a reality that we have imagined for it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're down to the last minute. I'm just going to check again. Does Adam, would you like to say anything, or Kostas or David? Apologies from Saoshi, he's had to go through the departure gate, so we've lost him. Would you like to come back, Adam?
David is.
Oh, David is. Sorry, David.
Yeah, no, I seem to be a bit out of sync with people here. My tendency would be not to go for a particular iconic representation, or a practical representation like the cardboard. I think that looking back to Charles' dramatic playing, where they are able to see the object and invent it through their imagination, having a cardboard replica of the mobile phone, you know, in that way, I can't slip it into my pocket easily. I can't stick it into my top pocket. I can't throw it on the floor. Whereas if I'm imagining it, for me, I think often that I think sometimes it is good to have something that stands for the object, but mostly I think I tended to go for, you know, imagining you're holding a lamp up rather than having a lamp, and then you can show it around and put it down or blow it out and do all sorts of things with it. So I think that's just a thought on the bringing into play the imagination, which may be touching a bit on what Kate was talking about and what you see, but when you're sort of evoking the image of it. I mean, I can imagine I've got the most expensive phone, and then somebody else come and try and grab that out of my hand. What? you know, if I've imagined I've somehow managed to get hold of the I don't even know what they are, the most expensive iPhone costing £2,000 or something, and I found one or I've stolen one, and it's an amazing thing to have. I mean, that I can imagine that maybe better than I can actually do it with a cardboard replica. I don't know. So that's just a thought to throw in.
Yes, thank you, David. Costas or Adam, we're over time, so
yeah. Just a very short, very short anecdote about iconic representations of phones. I used it in one of almost 10 years ago in one of my drama lessons, and the group, I was trying to put them into role by drawing their mobile phones that they received and I spent half an hour. They were so excited about having their own phones. It was a time when 9-year-olds still didn't have all phones. And they were so excited about having their own drawn phones that the next half hour of the drama lesson was them actually dramatic playing that they were using it, and it completely lost focus. It was a good learning for me, just to add a story about how bad a drama teacher I am.
Thank you. Kostas? No? Okay. Well, look, I mean, thank you very much to everyone. Thank you particularly to you, Adam, for putting it out there and trying to work in that practical way. And I think the areas of the discussion here, particularly relating to the power and the use of the object and how we change its narrative or its grammar, and that this whole question of when an iconic representation or a more authentic one, or now even an imagined object, how that can be used to open up Site D, I think is a really interesting area. And there's a lot to take away and think about, and I want to thank everyone for that for those contributions. I just want to say again, you know, there's a lot further we could go, I'm sure, but we've got to stop. We do have the Padlet though, so people can put these thoughts. I think any thoughts could be just added as reflections. There's a lot that's been on the chat which I can't keep up with that I think is really useful, even if that was added to the Padlet as a list of just very direct reference points to stimulate our ongoing thinking. And any other materials that people want to add, please do, because I think it gives us more to build on in this process of trying to understand how we work and how this approach to drama can really stimulate the imagination and open up gaps and begin to ask that question of why. And I just want to remind us all that there is one more, which is the 14th of June, or at least there's one more of this phase, and that will be chaired by Soshi, and I'll be leading it, and we'll be focusing on the importance of the tragic, and that does relate very much, to my mind at least, in terms of my thinking. I'm really interested in the tragic. That's my current obsession, but particularly how it relates to the extreme, and how you build the tension and the site to such a point where those gaps can really be opened up. And maybe that's something that we can explore a bit more in the next one. We'll be sending out notifications to that, and hope that you'll be able to join us again. And that's it, I think. I've not missed anything, have I? Other than to say, have a good evening, have a very good late night, Surong, and see you hopefully in a few weeks' time, whenever the 14th is. Thank you very much.